remember one day, Summer, and this is the defining moment. I was getting ready for work and I was mad. And I don't know if anybody right now has ever been mad getting ready for work. So I'm putting on my lipstick, I'm doing my hair. At the time I had relaxed hair, so I had real long relaxed hair. I'm getting it together, making funky face. And I'm really angry. And then something hit me. Why was I angry? These people were not coming to my house every day, showing up and beating me up. No, I was going out every single day for abuse. I was putting makeup on to be abused. That's like knowing someone's on the corner, waiting to whoop anybody's behind who walks past, and you choose to walk past that corner every single day. And so for the first time ever, it hit me, I'm doing this to me.
Hey everybody, I am back with another episode of SOA Success Stories. And today I have a special privilege of speaking to one of my newer friends, Crystal Washington. We've met probably about 7 or 8 years ago through the National Speakers Association. And I met Crystal at my first National Speakers Association Influence Conference. And she's probably look short, but she's probably right here on me. But this small stature woman is a powerhouse. But she's also a sweetheart. And so I am so grateful for the connection that I made with you, Crystal, with you all, with Crystal Washington, because she is a wealth of knowledge, and just a great human being. So much fun to be around. She is a technology futurist, and that's awesome for me because I am not, but I've learned so much from this woman. I can't wait for her to share a little bit of her story so that you can learn from her too. Crystal, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First off, I just have to say thank you so much, Summer, for having me, and for everyone that's tuned in right now. It is an honor to be with you. So thank you for spending your time with me. And a little bit about me, Summer, I'm a technology futurist, as you said. I primarily do speaking and consulting for larger corporations and associations, and married to an amazing man. I always tell people that I won the husband lottery. He is the most supportive and kind man ever. And I think we're going on 14 years. He's better at the dates than me, but I think we're about to hit our 14-year anniversary in a couple of weeks. I should know that date too, but he reminds me of everything. He's the one that's good on those things. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. I come out of corporate America. I was there for quite a few years in the beginning of my career. And then this little thing called social media came along. And I remember going to my boss. And because I came out of sales and then I was a revenue manager, which is kind of a marketing and front end of accounting, kind of an interesting thing in hospitality, I told him, I said, you should give me some time, just a little bit of time to explore this social media thing, because I have a feeling it's going to be big. I said, could you imagine if companies one day start getting on here? Of course, like now, Summer and everybody were like, duh. But it wasn't a thing then. And I said, companies can start to have conversations with their consumers. So like Pepsi can actually have a conversation with a Pepsi fanatic. And my boss looked at me, y'all, older baby boomer man. And he said, look, kid, you're cute and you make us a bleep load of money. He didn't say bleep, y'all. He said, stick to what you know. I said, oh, and I'm a millennial. I'm an old millennial, but I'm a millennial. And so I did something that's very millennial. I quit my job and I started a digital marketing firm because everything in me was driving me in that direction. And that was the beginning of me really working with organizations when it comes to technology and what's coming in the future. And the speaking sprung off from that.
That is awesome, Crystal. And you just took me back. You took me back, because I remember when I worked for the Memphis Grizzlies, just probably about the same time that you're talking about. And I was a marketing manager at the time. We had a digital marketing manager who handled our website, and she started talking to me about this social media thing. I was like, okay, that's good. She's got it. And she was figuring it out. And I'm like, okay, it's nothing big. And of course, I didn't have the foresight that you had. the marketing promotions, I was doing my thing. But it's amazing. And now, we're talking about this, and the people that'll be watching this video, a lot of them probably like, I don't know what they're talking about because they don't know about a time when social media didn't exist, right?
Right.
When it wasn't a thing.
But that happens all the time. There's going to be kids that don't know about a time when generative AI didn't exist. And for anyone who doesn't know that term, that's things like Chat GPT and Dolly and Whisper. So there's all these different AIs that almost create or seem to think like humans. So while this is new to all of us right now, for the most part, there's going to be humans we talk to in a few years that's all they know too.
That is so true. I didn't even think about that. And by the way, I am in love. Now that I'm playing around with and figuring it out, but you as a futurist, I know you are already on top of this and you knew this was coming. I already know. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for sharing your background and how you got into what you're doing and your segue into speaking and how you have merged the two, which is beautiful, which is absolutely beautiful. But let's get into your story and your background. So a little bit further. So Crystal, in this program, I have what I call the SOA success system.
Okay.
It's my belief that anybody, if they can learn how to overcome obstacles, eliminate excuses, and calculate choices, they can have what I call SOA success. And that is success no matter what happens in life. And Crystal, you are a SOA success woman. You make amazing posts on Facebook. I've learned so much just reading your posts on Facebook and learning your journey. You are a SOA success woman. Talk to us a little bit about some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome and just how you've done it to get to where you are today.
Oh, I've had a lot of obstacles, personal and professional, just like anybody. Like if you're watching us right now, you've had obstacles. We all have. So, growing up, I was born to a teen mother. My family put the fun in dysfunctional growing up. So there were all these different elements that really should have made me a statistic. But I was very fortunate that I have wonderful aunts and uncles. And don't get me wrong, my parents are great too. But my aunts and uncles really did above and beyond to ensure that I wouldn't fall into the same traps that maybe my parents did, right? And so I have the Harvard graduate aunt and the uncle that was the financial advisor, and all of them kind of pouring into me as a small child, knowledge that would serve me later. And so that definitely helped me through that. But I would say probably one of the defining challenges in my life was when I was in corporate America. So I ended up in hospitality, not because that's what I always wanted to do. And hospitality is hotel and restaurant management, casinos, things like that. In high school, when I was applying for colleges, I knew that I had to get the best scholarship possible because my family could not financially support me. It wasn't that they didn't want to, they just didn't have the means. And so the Conrad and Hilton School of Hotel and Restaurant Management, which is located at the University of Houston, and the University of Houston both approached me. And I had a lot of offers because I was at the top, like 5% of my class in high school. So I had really good grades, community service. But University of Houston, Conrad and Hilton said, if you choose this major, we will not only give you a full ride. So it wasn't even a monetary amount, whatever meal plan, wherever I want to live, however many classes I want a semester, but they would pay me an additional monetary value on top of it. So, but I had to choose hotel and restaurant management. And I was like, cool, it's a business degree where you have to like people. I'm in, right? And so that's how I got into that particular major. And so here I was going through school. I did all the right things, Summer. I did the internships. I did the externships. I had the grades. I graduated with it was like a 3.85 or something out of a 4.0 scale. So I did everything I was supposed to do. Got into corporate America. Started off, I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And I was faced with something I wasn't prepared for. And that was the dysfunction that can be corporate America. And so on one hand, my first few months working there, I remember being awarded in my company, like getting the manager of the quarter award and manager of the year because I was performing at such a high level. I was sales and I revived a dead market. But at the same time, while this was going on, I was dealing with sexual harassment from a boss's boss. I was dealing with another one of my boss's bosses attempting to get me to commit fraud against the US government to help them commit fraud. I was dealing with really bigoted comments in the workplace. So all of these things were going on while they were paying me well. And I realized, this is depressing. And so I moved from one department to another. I was in sales. And I was I would have consistently about 125% of my goal. I was actually sandbagging. Anybody that's not in sales, sandbagging means you don't even sign all your contracts by the end of the month, because if you go too much higher, they'll increase your goals. So you try to hold off. But I went into revenue management because I was trying to escape some of the dysfunction of one department going into another. Still followed me. And so I remember one particular day, and mind you, and I have to say, as a revenue manager, I was highly successful. I oversaw a group of people that were old enough to be my parents and grandparents, but I was still dealing with dysfunction, and I was shielding them from dysfunction because I didn't want my people to really be privy to the horrible environment they were in. And so I remember one day, Summer, and this is the defining moment, I was getting ready for work and I was mad. And I don't know if anybody right now has ever been mad getting ready for work. So I'm putting on my lipstick, I'm doing my hair. You know, at the time I had relaxed hair, so I had real long relaxed hair. I'm getting it together, making funky face. And I'm really angry. And then something hit me. Why was I angry? These people were not coming to my house every day, showing up and beating me up. No, I was going out every single day for abuse. I was putting makeup on to be abused. That's like knowing someone's on the corner, waiting to whoop anybody's behind who walks past, and you choose to walk past that corner every single day. And so for the first time ever, it hit me, I'm doing this to me. They're not doing this to me. If I choose not to go, they can't do this to me. Now, that does fly against everything I was taught as a woman, as an African-American, and just the American part of the African-American, right? Because you have a good job, you work hard, you don't complain, you know, every tub has it needs its own legs on its bottom, however the saying goes for the older people, whatever. But that something shifted in me that day. And so it wasn't long after then when I actually quit my job, because it was just so much dysfunction. But more importantly, I had this new vision. I had this new vision for what was possible, especially with social media. I was starting to see where things were going. And so I remember being in the HR department and they were begging me to stay. And I was like, no, there's nothing you can offer me at this point in time to keep me from leaving out this door. So the biggest obstacle I had to overcome was really my understanding of who was responsible for what in my life. And that doesn't mean that what some of those people said and did to me was okay. You know, I have some very specific stories I can get into on another. If you ever do another session where we're all drinking wine at the same time, I can give you some crazy stories from corporate. So I'm not saying it's okay, but I had to understand that I was making a choice to not do something else. And mind you, I'm not saying that's easy. You know, if you have children or other responsibilities, that really takes a lot of faith. And I don't want to just throw that around, but not everyone has the same support structure. So I'm not trying to make it sound like it's easy for everybody, but it was pivotal because that was the day I gave up excuses and I started realizing how I participate in my own oppression.
I love it. Look, Crystal, so we're going to go into excuses and choices in just a second. And that's a beautiful segue. So a couple of things though. One, I don't know if you know, I started in hospitality.
Oh.
I started in hospitality. So 4 years of internship in college with Hilton Hotels Corporation when they were promised. I don't know if you know when they were promised hotels and then they got bought by Hilton. And I have a whole story on hospitality. So as you're talking about that and even revenue, mine was in marketing. Mm-hmm. But I, as you say that, I thought that would be my life and my career, my journey too. So it's interesting that you say that and you share. But you know, something else I heard in what you just said too, and me knowing you and watching you and observing you too, that's why you're such an amazing aunt. Because of what you shared about your uncles and aunts, you realize how important, how life-changing a role as an aunt or an uncle can be in a child's life. And so I see that. And you know what? I have my own story, my own journey that makes me understand. But it is when people see it and they get it and they go full force like that. And that's why I'm the grandmother that you see that I am.
Yes.
Sometimes it's because you recognize how important. I love it. I love it. I love it. You are changing their lives. I'm watching it every post, every post. Okay, you started talking about excuses. So the next part of the SOA success system is eliminating excuses. So continue that story or share a little bit more about excuses that you've had to eliminate in your life.
Well, most of the excuses I was dealing with, and I'm going to say this with all respect for everybody's belief system. So I just want to say that I respect everyone's belief system. For myself, it required a fundamental shift based on how I was brought up. I had to give up my addiction to demons and devils. What that means is, and again, I'm not judging what anyone else believes. You're asking me about my story and what helped me function.
Yes.
The devil was not busy. Crystal was making bad decisions. The devil was not busy. Maybe something happened because things happen in the world. A hurricane happens. That's just nature. But my reaction is what I can control. If I act out in a certain way, Noah wasn't some type of demon or negative influence. I'm probably triggered by something I need to fix so that I learn how to treat people better, right? And so that shift for me, where I decided to own everything. And again, that doesn't mean that, have there been times in my life where I've been victimized? Absolutely. So again, I'm not excusing those behaviors, but I'm saying that my reaction, my choice to get help, my choice to do counseling or therapy, or just be more thoughtful about how I interact with other people. Am I being codependent? Am I encouraging codependency for others on me? So it's been a process, and it's painful because when you remove all the excuses, you're only faced with your stuff. And you realize we all want to believe we're good people. And I think I've settled on believing I'm someone who tries really hard to be a good person. I'm good with that. But you have to sit with your stuff. And there's always more stuff. The more you dig, you find more. But the blessing is that when you're willing to own it, you get better outcomes, and you can help the people around you get better outcomes because you're not stuck in your stuff. Because whatever stuff you have is going to come up in everything else you do. So like if you're a speaker like we are, and maybe you've been through some things and you haven't worked through your processes or worked through your trauma, you might have a hard time negotiating for money. When someone says, oh, their budget's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for a speaking engagement, you're going to ask for $2,000 because you can't even conceptualize your value. So I do give up excuses. I've given up excuses a long time ago, and even valid excuses don't serve us.
Yes.
Even if it's valid, it doesn't serve us. And telling someone an excuse doesn't serve us. I've gotten really good at apologies. I don't do a whole lot to people where I have to apologize very often, but the people that do get apologies from me will tell you I give the best apologies. I am humble. If I have wronged you in front of other people, I will bring them all back to the gathering and apologize to you in front of them. But giving up those excuses is so freeing because it allows you to grow.
I agree. I love it, Crystal. It's so freeing. It's powerful. It's life-changing. And there's this term though that I like to think about, and you kind of talked about it too. It's learned helplessness. It's learned helplessness. And since I've learned that term, it's been several years in my research and doing resilient speaking. A lot of people have that as a crutch, and they feel like they can't change a situation that they actually can change. And you just talked about that in your situation as you're putting your lipstick on, mad, and going to work. It's like, no, you can do something about this situation. You have power. You have the power to change your situation. It is based on your choices. And I'm glad you said what you said too about giving up the addiction to devils and demons. And I am a woman of faith and spirituality. But I too believe that it's choices. At the end of the day, we have choices. We make bad choices. We live the consequences of bad choices. We live the consequences of good choices too. But at the end of the day, we have way more control over our lives than I think we even think. Even I think. And it does come down to choices. So the third part of the SOA success system is calculated choices, making choices. Talk about some of the choices on your journey, Crystal.
Ooh, so many. When you first said that, I got a visual in my head. So Summer, when I first started the speaking piece, so the consulting was going great, the speaking piece came about, and I connected with my mentor, Karen McCullough, who was a much more successful speaker than I was. She'd been doing it for over a decade. So she was kind of leading me. And I remember at one point we had a conversation after a few years. And I mean, I was growing, the speaking business was growing, but I still had this original consulting business that wasn't quite related to where I was going. And she said, Crystal, you said you want to do what I do. I said, yes. And she said, I'm a keynoter. I said, I'm aware. And she said, and I do it full time. And I'm thinking, where's she going with this? And she said, it's the only thing I do. I said, okay. She said, this is not the only thing you do. You can't serve two masters. Mm. And I was thinking, lady, are you crazy? This is what's paying the bills. But I trusted her and I saw where she was going and I was walking in her footsteps. And so I let all of my client contracts come to an end. I didn't renew any of them. Now, my husband, who at the time had just started his own business a few months before I started mine. And we were dating at the time. By now we're married. And he's a recovering banker. I should mention that. So he quit his job in banking that was highly dysfunctional before I quit my job in hospitality. But he's a recovering banker, which should tell you something about my husband and money. So I remember him walking behind me because we used to have a different setup in the apartment we lived in, where he'd walk behind me. The dining room was my office. And he'd hear me telling clients I can't renew their contracts for a few $1,000s. And I just remember the look on his face as I'm on because we weren't really Zooming at the time. So I'm on the phone and he would just kind of look like, and he would never say anything except maybe, are you sure, baby? And I'm like, trust me. And then I remember when I understood about raising rates as a speaker and how it requires you to start saying no to your current rate, not negotiating very much, but literally saying no and demanding a higher level. And I remember my husband walking by as he heard me saying like no to $3,000 to speak for an hour, something like that. And he's just like, and I'm like, trust me. And he's calculated decisions and they all paid off. But I think I'm also demonstrating how important it is that if you have a mate, I'm not saying you have to have a mate, but if you have one, they need to be supportive, because if they are not supportive, I don't know how anybody can make it in terms of shifting their life, because there's going to be times where there's things that you do that are calculated because you have a certain degree of wisdom on where you're going, and it's going to look like foolishness to everybody else. And so if you don't have, if the person you're with doesn't trust your process, it's going to be really hard. So a lot of my calculations came with when I added certain things to my business. I'm known in the speaking world. My superpower in the back end of my business is systems. So I systematize stuff so I can take like long vacations in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. So I'm just hanging out there with caiman, which are like little alligators and pythons. And so we're just all chilling, and my business is still running. Obviously, I'm not taking calls out there, right? So I think when it comes to making calculated choices, it starts with writing down your vision, knowing where you're trying to go, writing it down. It needs to be recorded somewhere. And then you can start to work it. So whether that's vision board, whether that's just scratch on a piece of paper that you keep under your pillow at night, whatever. But start to write down where you're going, and it'll make you more strategic on your journey if you keep reviewing it, because everything you do should start to relate to the direction you're going in.
I love it. And I think about too, another calculated choice that you made, that you talked about before, was leaving your job. And so and that's a big one, because I know, and I probably, a lot of people who want to do that. And when I did, now it's been 11 years, which is hard to believe. And you also just spoke to this, and you said, sometimes when you have a vision and you can see, but everybody else around you thinks you are absolutely insane. Absolutely, because you left a good job, because I left a great job. I loved what I was doing. I didn't have the sexual harassment. I didn't have any of those things. I had a great situation and a great salary, but then I got a great vision and I actually discovered purpose. Like, This is why I've been through the things that I've been through.
Right.
And then I also discovered a skill and a talent that I did not know that I had. And so I said, okay, I gotta go. I gotta leave this job that a lot of people would love to have.
Right.
And so you made a calculated choice, and you did that scary thing too. And so yeah, talk about that a little bit. When you did make that decision, it's like, okay, no more of that.
It was so funny because, and I didn't really get into the whole story behind it, but there was something that led up to it about 30 days beforehand. I was working out in my gym inside of my apartment complex. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark. I was the only one in there. And I remember I was on the treadmill reading Millionaire. I think that's what it was called. And then I was listening to a song by Talib Kweli, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but the messaging, everything was aligning. But I heard this voice that said, "You're going to be out of there in 30 days." So I get off the treadmill and I'm looking in the bathroom trying to figure out who's speaking to me. I'm looking around. Nobody was there. So at the time I kept a journal. So when I got home, I wrote that down and tucked it away. And I was like, that's weird, and forgot about it. So on the day when I left my job, it was so funny. I came in there and one of the assistants, she wasn't my assistant. She was actually assistant for the sales department, but young Latina woman, she was crying. And I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she and I were close because they treated her so poorly. I trained her, even though she was in another department. So, we had a good rapport. I just wanted her to succeed. And they were just treating her like hot garbage. So she's crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? So she had overheard my boss and the boss of another department making racist jokes about me. And so it freaked her out. And I told her, I said, you know what? I said, you are so sweet. I said, don't cry on my account. I'm fine. I said, but now you know where you were. So you get to make the best choices for you. And so I walk on past her and I go into my little department. And when I sat down, I heard a voice again. Now I have to throw this out here because I didn't talk about this journey, but hearing voices is normally scary for me because many years ago I was medicated for that, but this was a different voice. But at first it's a little scary. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to get on medicine again. No more Wellbutrin. So the voice said, it's time to go and don't take anything with you. And I'm like, what in the world? But I had so much peace. I hadn't felt that much peace in years. It was like everything just fell away. And I was like, okay. And so I stood up and I told the ladies in my department, they're all women. I said, hey, I'm getting ready to go. Y'all want anything in my desk? I opened it up. I said, you can have anything you want. And I came through and I hugged them. They're in shock. I felt a little bad. They were in shock. But I said, I gotta go. You all know how to contact me. I'm here whenever you need me. And I went to HR and I told them, getting ready to go. And they're like, what happened? I told them. I said, but honestly, that's not even it. I'm leaving. So, they went and the managers had a quick, she's like, just give me 5 minutes. They ran and came back and they're like, we just really need you to stay. There's no one else who can fill your role. And there was some stuff that I created for the role. There were some very important federal government contracting elements that were dependent upon my knowledge, and no one else knew how to do it. To their knowledge, but they didn't know I had trained a young Latino guy who they had treated like trash to do my job. So there was somebody there. But yeah, I told him I'm leaving, left out the door. I remember it was sunshiny. I was wearing a 3-piece suit. So I had the vest on, the black pants. I remember twirling around in the sun. I remember it like it was yesterday. October 10th was the day. I remember that. But anywho, I get home and, I talked to my attorney and he was like, Crystal, you're fine. You're good. No problem. I talked to my then boyfriend, now husband, and he was like, good for you. He said, with your performance, you can always find another job, but now you get to focus on your business full time, the vision you've been given. And then I called my mother, and my mother was always very supportive. And my mom could be pretty hands-off with me because Summer, I've been a straight A student my whole life. Adults really didn't have to do too much for me. Like I signed my own report cards. So when I told her I quit this job, after all this years of perfect work and college and getting scholarships, she said, you heard a voice? I said, yeah. She said, are you sure you know which voice you heard? I said, trust me. My mom was so stressed. At the first time in my life, she'd been stressed out. But I say all that to say, that was probably one of the biggest calculated decisions that really didn't make sense to everybody else looking in. Like my family thought I had lost it. They were ready to get me committed. They didn't know what was happening, and fair, completely fair. But my now husband, then boyfriend, was like, you can do it.
That's
Now,
how.
yeah, I didn't have a safety net. I do have to mention this though. So each set of my parents, I had 2 younger siblings from each set of my parents. They're putting 2 kids through college. I did not live with my then boyfriend. I had my own bills, so I had no safety net. It was sink or swim, but he was supportive.
I think that's awesome, and I can totally relate to that so many ways. And that when I heard my heart speak. So just like you heard a voice, I feel like I heard my heart speak. And I still remember going and I was working at FedEx at the time, and they sponsored this big breakfast for a nonprofit here. And they sponsored the breakfast, so they sponsored like 20 of the tables. And so my senior vice president was there. And FedEx had actually put in, said that they were going to do buyouts. It's like, oh my God, now it might be time, because I had started speaking, kind of like you said, you had started your business. I had started. And I knew that I'm like, eventually I got to leave. I have to leave FedEx. This is what I'm supposed to do. Probably similar to how you felt. But I'm like, maybe a decade or something like that. But so I put in for the buyout because I qualified. I didn't get it. The next morning, I got an email saying I didn't get it. The next morning, I was at that breakfast, and our senior vice president came up to me and she said, Summer, I saw something you posted on Facebook. And I know she watches these videos, so shout out Lori Tucker. And, oh my God, we're friends on Facebook. No idea. And she said, yeah. She said, did you get the buyout? I said, no. And she said, you're leaving anyway, aren't you? I said, yeah. And I shocked myself. I'm like, oh no, I wasn't supposed to say yes. I didn't know. That was the moment for me, Crystal, that it was sort of your same voice that said, you're about to leave. You're about to leave. And so then I went up the chain, because then I had to go back and tell my manager and my director. And I left, and I haven't looked back. And the same thing with you. Nobody understood. But I'm so glad, because that's why I know you. That decision is why I know you. You and so many other amazing people that I've met on this journey. So thank you for sharing this story, Crystal. Now, you've definitely proven that you know how to overcome obstacles, eliminate excuses, and calculate choices to achieve success. But Crystal, how would you define success? What's your personal definition of success?
I love that you're asking me this. I recently had dinner with some of our colleagues at an event that you and I both attended, National Speakers Association's Thrive. And I was speaking to the person who chaired the event. And Mark Levy asked me, Crystal, what's the meaning of life? Which is random. But if anyone knows Mark Levy, that's what he'll do to you at a table full of people. And this is in alignment with your question, because it was amazing when he asked me that. I said, I am responsible to my ancestors and to the generations that come after me. For me, everything that I do is driven by that. Since I was very young, I've always had this ancestor consciousness. And over my life, I've spent thousands, maybe even tens of thousands by this point, of dollars and hundreds of hours tracing my own ancestry. So I know a lot of their stories. I know when we hit the shores over here, I know who owned what, who went through what. As a result of this, for me, success is continuing the journey of those wonderful people who set me up for success. It's filling in some of the gaps, some of the things where maybe they didn't have all the abilities or capabilities, or they were born at a time where they were restricted, finishing their work to make future generations more complete. And so for me, success is being in a position where I could hand my family all these stories around their ancestors, to honor these ancestors, but then do so much for my nieces and nephews and little cousins to set them up for success. And so that when cousin Chrissy or when TT is gone, even financially, they're in a much better place. So for me, success is being in alignment with these two groups and knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Are there monetary pieces to this? Of course there are, because people oftentimes say that money doesn't buy happiness. That is true. Money also doesn't, so money may not buy happiness, but money can buy a kidney surgery for someone who needs it in your family. And I don't know about you, but it makes me pretty happy when everybody's body is working, right? And so it's just that alignment. Am I honoring the folks that came before me? Am I contributing to the folks in front of me? If I am doing that and doing it well, I'm successful.
Okay, so I'm trying not to cry right now. Beautiful. And you know me and follow me. So tomorrow, and whenever this video goes out, but tomorrow, as we're recording this, is my grandmother's 101st birthday.
I saw you did a video with her. I was like,
oh. And she's super special to me. She's a big part of my story and why I'm able to say I have my college degrees and have had the career that I have after becoming a mom at 15. And then I'm really blessed because my other grandmother's birthday is next month and she'll be 98.
Wow.
And I wrote books about both of their lives. I interviewed both of them and I wrote books about both of their lives. So exactly what you said is so important to me. And those are, my two direct ancestors. And of course, it's much bigger than that. But I too, and I think not enough people value what you just said and understand yeah.
Let me show you something. I didn't plan on showing you this, but I'm gonna show you something.
Please do.
Can you see the doll up there?
Up there, yes.
That is my great, 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 great grandmother, Mary Constance. That is actually a doll made in her likeness. And I know her story, which is phenomenal. And she bought enslaved Africans and freed them. And one of her grandsons chartered the first school for free Black people in the United States. And it wasn't for them because they had been free for generations. That line actually had never been in slavery, which is a whole nother bizarre thing. I didn't know there were free Black people running around owning businesses in the 1700s, but apparently they were, and I'm related to them. But because they were so community driven, they chartered the school for the newly freed Black people. So, my ancestors were actually, the Black ones were more educated by far than the average Caucasian American in the United States. But understanding that they did these types of things, you can imagine that when I say being in alignment with what they did and going to the next generation, this isn't a small thing. Like if someone doesn't know all those stories, they might say, oh, that's nice, have a nice family. No, they did some things. And so I need to make sure that I am continuing their legacy. And so I agree with you. I think one of the best things we can do, most Americans do not have very much knowledge of their ancestry. And I'm being very specific because that's not actually an African-American thing. Most Americans that are not African-American, their ancestors came over in the late 1800s from many places where they didn't have great written records. So it really doesn't matter what race you are in this country. If your relatives came over around that time, you probably don't have that much history. But investing the time and energy to learn about them, and it takes time. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple decades now. It gives you the strength to go forward. It's like when COVID hit, I'll never forget this summer. I remember, as my calendar was clearing and I was like, uh-oh, because I'm a keynote speaker, right? That's my primary means of income. And I looked over because at the time I was in a different house and Mary Constance was right here. She's right here looking at me. And I was like, if you could go through the British people owning Louisiana, where you were free and stuff before they came in, told you have to slap a head wrap on your head because you're trying to attract Caucasian men and taking your businesses and stuff away. I'm like, if you could go through that, wearing a little mask is nothing. So I do encourage everybody to, really try to understand their family history and spend the time. And not all the stories are pretty either. Everybody's related to some nutty people too. And that's okay, because sometimes we start to understand the root of our dysfunctions too. We're like, oh, Cousin Larry used to do that. That might explain why I have this problem today. Okay. Great Cousin Larry.
It helps with self-awareness for sure and resilience. So same as you. When I think about my grandmothers and some of the things that they went through and overcame, major things, puts in perspective. It really puts things in perspective, and it also helps you with your responsibility. It's a sense of responsibility. And I love how you're passing it on to the next generation. I'm trying to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, Crystal. So that's big. You touched on thing for me, a real thing for me. But that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I have one last question. So, Crystal, yeah, like I said, since I met you, you've been dropping them gems, dropping them dimes, full of information, full of wisdom. I mean, I always forget that you're younger than I am. I'm like, oh, how did she? But so you always share a lot of advice, and you've shared a lot of advice since we've been talking today. But what's one piece of advice that you would leave someone watching this who wants to be successful, however they define success, but they have obstacles, they have challenges like we all do? What's one piece of advice that you would give?
So now I'm going to put on my futurist hat. And a futurist is someone who helps other people shape the future. We predict possible futures and then help people prepare for the future that they desire, and prepare for even the futures they don't desire, for that matter. But my one piece of advice would be, understand that the future is not something static that's already created. You're co-creating it right now through your decisions. And so if you have a desired future, do everything you can in your power to set yourself up for success. And that doesn't necessarily mean just happy wishful thinking. So I live in Houston, Texas. We get hurricanes. What I do is every year I make sure that we are stocked up on everything we could possibly need, so that if we have to go 2, 3, 4 weeks without being able to leave the house or access a grocery store, we're in good shape. So that's not wishful thinking. That's not even me preparing for the best future. That's preparing for a possible future that I don't want, but if it happens, I am going to be set up for success through it. What was interesting is the same level of preparation helped me during COVID, because when everybody made a run on the grocery stores, we already have a good amount stockpiled just because we live in Houston and have hurricanes. So that having been said, think about the future that you want and start aligning yourself in a way where you can reach forward into the future and pull the version out of all the many different versions that are there. Pull your desired version back towards you, because you're co-creating it right now with your choices.
That was good. That was good, and that was powerful. That was powerful. Thank you so much, Crystal, for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing in this interview, but thank you for sharing over these years all the wisdom that you have, and all that you contributed to my life and to all of us as part of NSA, African Americans that are part of NSA, and everybody that's a part. You're awesome. You're really, really awesome. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I love you, Crystal. I love you, and I thank you. And I can't wait to share your story. Thanks, girl.
Thank you.